First story, by Emily Thompson. It was a typical Friday night in the small town of Oakridge, nestled in the heart of Pennsylvania. I had just finished my shift at the local diner and decided to catch up with some friends at a nearby house party. As the night wore on, laughter and music filled the air, but eventually, I realized it was time to call it a night. The clock struck 2 a.m., and I said my goodbyes. The streets were eerily quiet as I walked alone toward my apartment. The dim glow of the streetlights cast long shadows, creating a sense of unease. I quickened my pace, hoping to reach the safety of my home sooner. As I turned a corner onto Elm Street, I noticed a figure in the distance. A tall silhouette stood beneath a flickering streetlight, obscured by the darkness. My heart raced as I approached, my footsteps echoing in the quiet night. The figure didn't move, and I couldn't discern any features in the shadows. Nervously, I greeted the stranger, but there was no response. I continued walking, trying to shake off the discomfort. However, as I glanced over my shoulder, I saw the figure trailing behind me, maintaining a constant distance. Panic set in, and I veered off the main road, taking a shortcut through a dimly lit alley. The echoes of my footsteps were joined by those of the mysterious pursuer. I dared not look back, my mind racing with thoughts of escape. I reached into my bag, clutching my phone tightly, ready to dial for help if needed. The alley seemed to stretch on forever, and I felt a sinking realization that I might not make it home unscathed. Just when I thought the situation couldn't get any worse, a chilling sound pierced the silence. It was a low, guttural growl, echoing off the alley walls. My heart pounded in my chest as I quickened my pace, the growls growing louder. I dared to steal a glance behind me, and my blood ran cold. A pair of glowing eyes stared back at me from the shadows. Fear paralyzed me as I realized the figure wasn't human. It was a feral dog, its eyes reflecting the dim light. The growls intensified as the dog closed the distance, its posture aggressive. Terrified, I sprinted out of the alley, the dog hot on my heels. Adrenaline fueled my escape, and I finally reached the safety of my apartment building. Gasping for breath, I looked back one last time to see the feral dog retreating into the night. That night, Oakridge felt more ominous than ever. The encounter left me with a newfound appreciation for the hidden dangers that could lurk in the seemingly ordinary shadows of a quiet town. Second story, by James Miller. The city of Chicago buzzed with life, even in the late hours of the night. I had spent the evening catching up with friends at a trendy downtown bar. As the clock neared midnight, I decided to call it a night and head home. I ordered a rideshare, and soon enough, a car pulled up to the curb. The driver, a middle-aged man named Robert, greeted me with a warm smile. We exchanged pleasantries as he navigated the city streets. However, as we entered a desolate stretch of road on the outskirts of the city, the atmosphere shifted. Robert's friendly demeanor morphed into an unsettling silence. The city lights dimmed, leaving only the glow of the dashboard to illuminate the car's interior. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I noticed Robert frequently glancing at me through the rearview mirror, his eyes lingering a bit too long. Unease settled in the pit of my stomach as I asked Robert to confirm the destination. His response was curt, and a tense silence enveloped the car. Suddenly, the engine sputtered, and the car rolled to a stop. Panic gripped me as I realized we were stranded in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by the looming darkness. Robert's demeanor shifted once again, this time into a sinister grin. He locked the doors, and the realization hit me. I was trapped in the confined space with a stranger who was anything but friendly. I fumbled for my phone, ready to call for help, but Robert reached into the glove compartment and pulled out a knife. His voice, now laced with malice, demanded my wallet and phone. I complied, my mind racing with thoughts of escape. In a moment of desperation, I feigned illness, clutching my stomach and begging him to let me go. To my surprise, he hesitated, his sadistic grin faltering. Seizing the opportunity, I flung open the car door and bolted into the darkness. I could hear Robert cursing behind me as I sprinted toward the distant glow of city lights. Adrenaline fueled my escape, and I didn't dare look back until I reached the safety of a well-lit street. I reported the incident to the police, and they launched an investigation into the rogue rideshare driver. The experience left me with a profound distrust of the seemingly convenient services that had become an integral part of city life. Third story, by Olivia Anderson. It was a chilly autumn night in the quiet town of Asheville, North Carolina. I had spent the evening at a friend's house, immersed in stories and laughter. As the clock struck midnight, I decided to walk home, relishing the crisp air and the soothing rustle of leaves beneath my feet. The path home took me through a serene park, shrouded in darkness. The only source of light was the soft glow of the lampposts lining the walking trail. The park had always felt like a safe haven, but that night, a sense of foreboding lingered in the air. Halfway through the park, I noticed a shadowy figure sitting on a bench, obscured by the overhanging branches. As I approached, the figure became more distinct, a man hunched over, his face concealed by a wide-brimmed hat. Something about his presence sent shivers down my spine. I quickened my pace, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling. But as I passed the bench, the man's head snapped up, revealing a twisted, malevolent grin. My heart raced as I continued walking, the man's gaze following my every move. Fear gripped me, and I fumbled for my phone, ready to call for help. Just as I dialed 911, I heard the distinct sound of footsteps behind me. I glanced over my shoulder to find the man now standing, his hat casting a shadow over his face. Panic set in as he closed the distance, his footsteps quickening to match mine. The park, once a source of comfort, now felt like a labyrinth of terror. I made a split-second decision to deviate from the path and take a less traveled route. The man followed suit, his relentless pursuit sending waves of dread through me. I darted through the maze of trees, hoping to find refuge. The park, once familiar, now seemed like an endless nightmare. Finally, I burst out onto a well-lit street, gasping for breath. I looked back to find the man lingering at the park's edge, his sinister grin still visible in the distance. I sprinted home, my senses heightened, and barricaded myself inside. The next day, I reported the chilling encounter to the local authorities. The park, once a symbol of tranquility, now bore the stain of a nightmarish confrontation. The incident left me questioning the safety of familiar spaces and taught me that even the most serene settings could harbor unsettling secrets. Fourth story, by Benjamin Martinez. The city lights of Seattle shimmered in the distance as I left a friend's apartment after a late-night gaming session. The streets were nearly empty, and the air carried a biting chill. I pulled my jacket tighter, hoping to ward off the cold as I walked toward the nearest subway station. As I descended into the dimly lit subway platform, an eerie feeling settled over me. The rhythmic echo of my footsteps bounced off the tiled walls. The distant hum of the approaching train offered some solace, but an unsettling awareness lingered. I glanced around, noticing a man standing at the far end of the platform, his hood drawn low over his face. The train arrived, its doors opening with a mechanical hiss. I stepped into the near-empty carriage, choosing a seat near the center for a sense of security. The man from the platform entered the train, his footsteps deliberate as he approached. I felt a knot tightening in my stomach, a growing unease that something was off. The man sat across from me, his hood still concealing most of his features. I tried to focus on my phone, pretending not to notice, but the atmosphere in the train car grew tense. Glancing up, I saw the man staring directly at me, his eyes piercing through the shadows. The air seemed to thicken as the train continued its journey. At the next stop, more passengers entered, providing a temporary reprieve. The man, however, remained fixated on me. I decided to switch to a different carriage, hoping to lose him among the growing crowd. As I moved, he mirrored my actions, maintaining a disturbing proximity. Uneasy glances were exchanged among the other passengers, their discomfort palpable. I contemplated alerting the subway security, but the fear of escalating the situation held me back. My mind raced with the possibilities, and the minutes felt like hours as the train reached my stop. I exited, my heart pounding, and the man followed suit. I navigated the bustling streets, weaving through the crowds in an attempt to shake him off. But his persistence was unwavering, a shadow in the periphery of my vision. Desperation set in as I approached a well-lit intersection. I decided to confront him, turning to face the hooded stranger. His eyes, void of emotion, locked onto mine. Without a word, he abruptly turned and vanished into the night, leaving me shaken and bewildered on the city streets. The incident haunted my thoughts for weeks, a lingering sense of vulnerability that had permeated the routine of my daily life. The city, once a haven of familiarity, now held a darker edge that I couldn't shake. Fifth Story, by Isabella Carter. I found myself on a desolate highway in the outskirts of Phoenix, Arizona, after a late shift at a distant warehouse. The desert night was pitch black, with only the occasional flash of headlights from passing vehicles. I felt a chill despite the warmth of the desert air and couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone on the empty road. As I drove through the vast expanse, my headlights caught sight of a stranded car on the side of the highway. My instincts told me to keep going, but a sense of duty compelled me to stop and offer assistance. I pulled over, the crunch of gravel beneath my tires the only sound in the stillness of the night. Approaching the abandoned vehicle, I noticed it was eerily silent. No signs of life or movement. A shiver ran down my spine as I peered through the car window, half expecting to see someone inside. But the interior was empty, the car left like a ghost in the desert. Just as I considered returning to my car, a distant howl echoed through the night. I froze, the sound sending shivers down my spine. The howl was followed by a series of haunting growls that seemed to come from all directions. Panic set in, and I rushed back to my car, slamming the door shut. As I sped away, the growls persisted, seemingly keeping pace with my vehicle. Glancing in the rearview mirror, I caught a glimpse of shadowy figures darting between the cacti lining the highway. Fear gripped me as I realized I was being pursued by something inhuman. The highway stretched on endlessly, the growls intensifying. I contemplated calling the police, but my phone showed no signal. In the distance, I spotted the neon lights of a small gas station and aimed for it, desperate for refuge. The growls echoed louder, creating an unsettling cacophony. I pulled into the gas station, the flickering fluorescent lights casting an eerie glow. I rushed inside, breathless and terrified, only to be met with the indifferent gaze of the cashier. I tried to explain the situation, but he dismissed it as desert wildlife, a common occurrence. Reluctantly, I left the gas station, the growls now a distant echo. The highway, once a mundane route home, now held a lingering sense of danger. The desert night had revealed its secrets, leaving me to grapple with the unsettling realization that sometimes the isolation of the open road could lead to encounters beyond the realm of reason. Sixth Story, by Jonathan Harris. It was a foggy night in the quaint town of Salem, Massachusetts, known for its rich history and tales of the supernatural. I had just attended a Halloween party at a friend's historic home, and as the clock struck midnight, I decided to walk back to my hotel. The narrow cobblestone streets were cloaked in an otherworldly mist, creating an atmosphere straight out of a Gothic novel. The party had left me in high spirits, but the eerie fog dampened my enthusiasm. The glow of the street lamps cast long shadows, and the air felt thick with a mysterious energy. Salem, with its reputation for the paranormal, seemed to come alive in the witching hour. As I strolled through the dimly lit streets, a distant sound caught my attention, a soft, haunting melody carried by the wind. Intrigued, I followed the sound, navigating the labyrinthine paths that wound through the historic district. The music led me to an old cemetery, its weathered tombstones barely visible through the dense fog. In the center of the cemetery, I spotted a figure hunched over an ancient-looking instrument, playing the haunting melody that had guided me. The musician, draped in tattered clothing, seemed oblivious to my presence. Curiosity overcoming my unease, I approached to get a better look. The melody intensified, filling the air with an enchanting yet disconcerting vibe. As I drew closer, the musician abruptly stopped playing, the silence echoing through the mist. Without looking up, the figure spoke in a hushed tone, inviting me to join a gathering of kindred spirits beyond the cemetery gates. A chill ran down my spine, and I hesitated. The fog seemed to thicken, making it difficult to see beyond the wrought iron gates. My rational mind warned against following a mysterious figure into the unknown, but the allure of the music and the mystique of Salem's history captivated me. Against my better judgment, I entered the cemetery gates, the fog swallowing me whole. The atmosphere became charged with an otherworldly energy as I navigated the maze of tombstones. The musician led me deeper into the darkness, the mist swirling around us like spectral dancers. As we reached a clearing, I saw a gathering of hooded figures, their faces obscured by shadows. The air hummed with an ancient power, and I felt a sense of unreality. The leader of the group, a figure cloaked in a flowing robe, welcomed me to their midnight gathering, promising revelations beyond the veil of the living. A mixture of fear and fascination held me captive as the group began a ritualistic dance. The fog seemed to part, revealing a portal to another realm. The music swelled, and I hesitated on the precipice of the unknown. In a moment of clarity, I snapped out of the enchantment. Fear gripped me as I turned and fled the gathering, retracing my steps through the cemetery. The fog clung to me like ethereal fingers, but I emerged back into the dimly lit streets of Salem, my heart pounding. The experience left me questioning the thin veil between reality and the supernatural. Salem's haunted history had come alive in a way I never anticipated, and the echoes of that eerie night lingered in my memories, a reminder that sometimes the line between the natural and the supernatural can blur in the most unexpected ways. Seventh Story, by Sophia Reynolds. It was a stormy night in the coastal town of Charleston, South Carolina. I had spent the evening working late at a waterfront cafe, the sound of crashing waves and distant thunder providing an ominous soundtrack to the night. As I closed up the cafe, I realized I was the last person on the deserted boardwalk. The wind howled through the narrow alleys between buildings, and rain lashed against the cobblestone streets. Charleston, usually known for its southern charm, felt like a ghost town in the midst of the storm. I pulled my rain-soaked jacket tighter, the eerie quiet amplifying the sound of my footsteps. As I walked along the boardwalk, I noticed a flickering light in the distance. Intrigued, I followed the feeble glow to a centuries-old lighthouse at the edge of the harbor. The storm had intensified, and the lighthouse stood as a solitary sentinel against the tempest. As I approached, the creaking of the lighthouse door caught my attention. A figure emerged, drenched in rain, their face obscured by the hood of a tattered cloak. Without uttering a word, the mysterious person beckoned me inside. Against my better judgment, I entered the lighthouse. The interior was dimly lit, the feeble glow of a lantern casting long shadows on the ancient walls. The air was heavy with the scent of salt and damp wood. The mysterious figure led me up the winding staircase, each step echoing in the confined space. As we reached the top, the storm outside raged with increased fury. The figure gestured toward the panoramic windows, revealing a sight both breathtaking and unsettling. The waves crashed against the harbor, and the lightning illuminated the silhouette of a ghostly ship sailing through the tempest. The figure spoke in cryptic whispers, weaving tales of lost souls and maritime tragedies. They claimed to be a guardian of the lighthouse, attuned to the spirits that roamed the coastal waters. I listened, captivated by the eerie tales that seemed to resonate with the howling wind outside. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted. The figure's demeanor became intense, their eyes fixated on the stormy sea. A mournful wail echoed through the lighthouse, and I felt a presence in the room that sent shivers down my spine. The lantern flickered, casting a spectral glow on the figure's face. In a voice laden with sorrow, the figure warned of an impending disaster at sea. They implored me to spread the word, to warn the coastal residents of the impending danger. As quickly as the encounter had begun, the figure vanished into the shadows. I descended the lighthouse stairs, the storm outside showing no signs of relenting. The weight of the encounter hung heavily on my shoulders as I emerged back onto the boardwalk. The flickering lantern light of the lighthouse behind me seemed to cast a long, haunting shadow over the stormy night. As I made my way through the deserted streets, the urgency of the figure's warning lingered in my thoughts. Whether it was a supernatural premonition or the product of an overactive imagination, the stormy night in Charleston left me with an indelible impression of the thin veil between the ordinary and the mysterious. Eighth Story, by Christopher Hayes. It was a frigid winter night in the city of Detroit, Michigan, known for its industrial grit and cold urban landscapes. I had just finished a late shift at a tech startup, and the deserted streets were eerily quiet as I trudged through the snow towards the nearest subway station. The glow of distant streetlights created an ethereal halo in the frosty air. As I descended into the subway station, a sudden unease settled over me. The stark, artificial lighting flickered intermittently, casting long, unsettling shadows on the tiled walls. The rhythmic clatter of distant train wheels echoed through the empty platforms. I quickened my pace, eager to escape the eerie stillness. As I waited on the platform, I noticed a disheveled man pacing near the edge. His erratic movements, and wild gaze made me uneasy, but the station was deserted, and I convinced myself it was merely the paranoia of a tired mind. The approaching train rumbled in the distance, its headlights cutting through the dimness. The man's demeanor shifted as the train approached. With a sudden burst of energy, he sprinted towards the edge of the platform. Panic surged through me as he leaped onto the tracks just as the train screeched to a halt. The conductor's voice crackled over the intercom, announcing a temporary delay. I stared in disbelief as the man, seemingly unharmed, rose from the tracks and disappeared into the shadows of the platform. The other passengers exchanged nervous glances, their expressions mirroring my own confusion. The intercom crackled again, this time with an apology for the delay and a promise to resume service shortly. When the train finally arrived, the atmosphere inside was tense. The disheveled man, now seated in a distant corner, stared blankly ahead. The other passengers avoided eye contact, silently processing the bizarre incident. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, a lingering unease that persisted even after I reached my stop. Exiting the subway, I found the snowfall had intensified, blanketing the city in a hushed white silence. The streets, normally bustling with activity, felt deserted. I trudged through the snow-laden sidewalks, the eerie calm amplifying the strangeness of the subway encounter. As I approached my apartment building, a distant sound caught my attention, a faint, haunting melody carried by the wind. Intrigued, I followed the sound to a nearby park. The snow-covered trees cast long shadows, and the melody seemed to emanate from a figure seated on a park bench. It was an elderly woman, bundled up against the cold, playing a mournful tune on an old accordion. Her eyes, clouded with age, held a depth of sorrow that sent shivers down my spine. I stood there, captivated by the haunting melody that seemed to echo the peculiar events of the night. The woman paused, her gaze locking onto mine. In a trembling voice, she spoke of a bygone era, of a love lost to the passage of time. Her story unfolded like a melancholic ballad, weaving through decades of joy and heartache. As she spoke, the snowfall intensified, creating an almost dreamlike ambience. When the tale reached its conclusion, the woman handed me a weathered photograph, a sepia-toned image capturing a moment frozen in time. The faces in the photograph seemed familiar, and a chill ran down my spine as I realized they were the same passengers from the subway. The woman's eyes held a knowing sadness as she uttered cryptic words about the cyclical nature of existence. Bewildered and entranced, I watched as she resumed playing the accordion, the haunting melody lingering in the winter air. I left the park, the weight of the strange encounter settling in my thoughts like an unresolved chord. As I entered my apartment, the snowfall outside intensified, cloaking the city in a hushed stillness. The events of that winter night in Detroit left me questioning the boundaries between reality and the surreal, the mundane and the extraordinary, as the echoes of a mysterious accordion melody lingered in the recesses of my mind. Ninth Story, by Natalie Bennett. The coastal town of Portland, Oregon, bathed in the soft glow of streetlights, provided a picturesque backdrop for my late-night journey. I had just attended a gallery opening, the scent of creativity and the hum of conversation still lingering in my senses. As I walked along the waterfront, a tranquil mist rolled in from the ocean, casting an otherworldly ambience over the scene. The city lights reflected off the gentle ripples of the river, creating a mesmerizing dance of shadows. The familiar sound of seagulls echoed in the distance, punctuating the stillness of the night. Portland, known for its quirky charm, felt like a haven of serenity beneath the veil of darkness. As I approached the steel bridge, A sudden chill ran down my spine. The mist thickened, obscuring the view of the waterfront. Unease settled in, amplified by the haunting call of a distant foghorn. The tranquility that enveloped the city moments ago transformed into an eerie stillness. Against my better judgment, I continued across the bridge, the rhythmic clatter of my footsteps the only sound in the desolate night. Midway, the mist parted momentarily, revealing a figure standing at the far end of the bridge. The silhouette, shrouded in darkness, seemed to materialize from the fog. As I drew closer, the figure became more distinct, an elderly man with a weathered face, dressed in tattered clothing that seemed out of place in the upscale city. He stood hunched over, staring into the abyss of the river below. A heavy silence hung in the air, broken only by the distant cries of seagulls. I hesitated, unsure whether to continue or turn back. The man's presence felt otherworldly, as if he belonged to a different era. Without looking away from the river, he began to speak in a low, gravelly voice, recounting tales of the city's maritime history, of lost sailors and ghostly ships that sailed beneath the steel bridge. As the man spoke, the mist swirled around us, creating a spectral dance that seemed to respond to his words. The air became charged with an ancient energy, and I felt a connection to the tales he wove. He spoke of a time when the river was a highway of dreams and despair, and the steel bridge bore witness to the echoes of the past. Suddenly, the man fell silent, his gaze fixed on a distant point in the mist. The foghorn's mournful call intensified, resonating through the bridge. In that moment, the boundary between the present and the bygone eras seemed to blur, and I felt a profound connection to the history that lingered in the night. The mist closed in again, and the man, as if fading into the fog, vanished from sight. I stood alone on the steel bridge, the foghorn's call lingering in the air. As I continued my journey through the city, the haunting tales of the old man echoed in my thoughts, leaving me with a sense of reverence for the hidden stories that dwell beneath the surface of even the most familiar places. 10th Story, by Gabrielle Taylor. The neon lights of Las Vegas, Nevada, flickered in the desert night, creating a kaleidoscope of colors that danced in the warm breeze. I had just left a lively casino after a night of entertainment, the rhythmic sounds of slot machines still echoing in my ears. As I strolled along the bustling strip, the cacophony of laughter and music blended with the distant hum of the city. Amidst the glamour and excess, I felt a sudden desire for solitude. I decided to take a detour away from the bustling crowds, exploring the quieter side streets that branched off the main drag. As I wandered, the luminous glow of the strip became a distant memory, replaced by the dimly lit alleys and the occasional flickering streetlight. The night had a surreal quality, the contrast between the glittering strip and the quiet alleys creating an almost dreamlike atmosphere. As I turned a corner, I noticed a figure standing beneath a flickering streetlight, a street performer dressed as a mime, frozen in an eerie pose. Curiosity drew me closer, and I realized there was something unsettling about the mime's stillness. The painted smile on their face seemed frozen, devoid of the usual playful expression. A chill ran down my spine as I hesitated, wondering if this was a performance or something more inexplicable. To break the eerie silence, I greeted the mime, but there was no response. The figure remained motionless, their painted eyes fixed on an indistinct point in the distance. Unease settled in as I continued down the alley, the dim light casting long shadows that seemed to dance in the still night. As I walked further, the sounds of the strip faded into the background, replaced by an unsettling quiet. The alleys twisted and turned, creating a labyrinthine path that seemed to defy the logic of the city. The occasional flicker of a distant streetlight added to the sense of disorientation. Suddenly, a low, haunting melody echoed through the alleys. The sound seemed to emanate from the shadows, weaving through the deserted streets. Intrigued, I followed the music, turning down narrow passageways and hidden corners. The melody grew more pronounced, the notes creating an otherworldly ambience. As I rounded a final corner, I found myself in a hidden courtyard bathed in the soft glow of moonlight. In the center stood a figure, a street musician with a violin, playing the haunting melody that had guided me. The mime, seemingly released from their frozen state, danced to the music, their movements both graceful and unsettling. Mesmerized, I watched as the impromptu performance unfolded. The music and the mime's dance seemed to transcend the boundaries of reality, creating a surreal experience that blurred the lines between the ordinary and the extraordinary. The alleyways, once quiet and deserted, became a stage for a nocturnal spectacle. As the last note of the violin faded into the night, the streetlight flickered, casting a momentary shadow over the courtyard. The mime and the musician stood motionless, as if frozen in time. In that suspended moment, the surreal encounter left me with a lingering sense of wonder and an appreciation for the unexpected beauty that could be found in the hidden corners of even the most vibrant cities. Thank you for sticking with us through the whole video. Also, I recommend you this video you see on screen, one of the scariest on my channel. If you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe and like this video. This helps me bring you more thrilling content every day. If this video sent shivers down your spine, let me know in the comments.